Today we're bringing you our latest episode of
Life in Stereo with your host Stephen Stone and co-host Steve Gibbons.
All right, thank you. And before we introduce our special guest, we just want to say that we're coming live from the Bloomingdale Individual Advocacy Group Day Training Center. Steve comes here every day for services, and I've been here 20 plus years as an employee. And if our viewers want to learn more about our agency, www.iagcares.org. And today we're really privileged, and I really mean this, we're really privileged to have as our guest world-renowned rock historian. And I saw on one of your podcasts that I think you said that's what you want to be most known for.
That's what I am most known for, yeah.
That's awesome. And we'll want to hear much more about that. Rock historian, producer, author, #1 podcast person. And this is Denny Somach. We're so happy that you wanted to join us, and we're really privileged. Before we start up,
happy to be here, by the way.
What's
happy
that?
Happy to be here.
Oh, thank you, Denny. Really, thank you. Before we start, did you know Jack Douglas?
Yeah, I met him a few times.
He was a producer for Aerosmith.
Okay.
He did the last John Lennon album, the Milk and Honey, I think.
Milk and Honey. He just passed away a few days ago, I think it was. So I figured probably Denny had met him or whatever, so we wanted to just
in memoriam of
say a little bit about, Jack Douglas.
Was that the John Lennon album that had Double Fantasy? No, who produced that? Was it George Martin?
Which one? Double Fantasy?
Yeah.
No, it was produced by Phil. No. I can't remember myself.
Oh, we stumped him with the historian. We stumped him already.
It might have been Jack. It might have been Jack Douglas. I don't know.
Yeah.
So Denny, I always, when we have our guests, a lot of the bands and people that we have on, I might know or know quite a bit about them. So I'll write up a little blurb, a script about what we're going to talk about and that type of thing. So with you, I hate to say, I looked through the bios and I looked at your podcasts, and I was just overwhelmed. I could barely really put anything together. I've written the script like 10 times because I'm like, he's done so much, I can't keep it clear. So I think the best way to do this, I know you've done so many things, I might just say, hey, tell us about your this or that, and you just talk.
So this one's more off the cuff because
you're a podcaster supreme. We're just kind of learning and doing it.
We're a bunch of squares.
We're new, but you're the expert. So I just wanted to say that you've done so many things. So just tell us about being a rock historian. We're interested to hear that.
Well, that came about basically because I've been involved in just about every single area of the business. I started out at college to be a business major, and I joined the college radio station, and that sort of changed everything. I got a job in the city where I was going to school on a regular radio station.
Now, which college is this?
Where did you start out in Allentown?
Allentown, Pennsylvania.
PA.
Home of that
Billy Joel.
Yep, I was gonna say.
He was gonna say.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you started.
I got a Billy Joel story too, I can tell you.
Please.
Please do. Well, I don't think you want to start there.
No, we'll save your stories for towards the end of it.
And then after that, you went to another radio station, correct?
Yeah, then I got a job in Philadelphia at WYSP. And it was just when I had just graduated. They had asked me about 6 months earlier if I wanted a job there because they had a part-time opening.
Okay.
And I said, well, no, I only have one more semester. I want to finish school. And then as soon as that, just by coincidence, the position opened up again, and I went to Philadelphia.
Okay, awesome.
And then from there, I did just about every shift: middays, afternoons, evenings. I heard about this network that NBC Radio was starting called The Source, and they were looking for people to produce programming for them for the network. They had like 250 affiliates. So they just asked people to submit ideas, and I submitted a couple of ideas, and they loved them. So they signed me up.
Is
And
that the Rock of the Century and
I
Legends of?
produced most of their long form shows.
Wow.
We had a short form daily feature called the Rock Report. I'm sorry. I produced that. And then after doing that for a while, I ended up doing some things with Westwood One and ABC and CBS and
Whoa,
Wow.
United Stations, all these other
the big
companies.
dudes.
Yeah.
Rolling Stone magazine wanted to start a radio show and a network. The same thing happened. I got a call. They're looking for ideas. I said, I got a great idea for Rolling Stone. I went up there and did my presentation in front of Jan, and that's Jan Wenner, the publisher. And
Publisher of Rolling
they
Stone.
loved it, and I got that job. So I had actually 4 or 5 shows going at once
Now, what was that job with Rolling Stone? Interviewing
to
people.
create a show for them.
Okay.
And I did. They have a book, a pretty recognized book called The Illustrated History of Rock and Roll. A lot of people have seen it.
Sure.
And I just said to him, I said, we should just take this book because it's all divided into guitar players in San Francisco, all different elements of the rock eras. I said, why don't we, and the history is still being written. This was back in the early
You know,
80s.
I just realized this would be a perfect podcast to do Mount Rushmore with him for, because he knows quite a bit.
Right. Steve always likes to ask the guest, give us your Mount Rushmore of guitar players,
Drummers, whatever.
drummers.
Okay. Well, anyway, so I created this show called The Continuous History of Rock and Roll.
It's a spinoff
So,
of
and I
okay.
followed the book, chapter on great guitar players, chapter on great drummers, chapter on Pink Floyd, whatever is in the book. And they loved the concept, and we launched this show. It was a weekly show, and great clearance because it was connected to Rolling Stone.
Sure.
We
Yeah.
had about 300 stations at one point. It was a big show, and
Wow.
so now I was lucky. Just about every show that I created, I didn't just
Big.
create shows and go out and sell them. I waited to find a niche or a hole somewhere,
Okay.
and I noticed that the next thing I noticed was the Beatles. I'm a big Beatle fan.
Right.
Steve is as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
Big.
America was the only country that didn't have a weekly Beatles show. There was one in England, there was one in Germany, there was even one in Israel. So
Wow.
I decided I think we should, because there are a lot of people here doing their own Beatles shows, Breakfast with the Beatles, Sunday with the Beatles. I said, well,
Uh,
somebody ought to provide one that's national syndication because I could get guests that they couldn't get. And I got the perfect host, which was a guy named Scott Muni, who's a legendary
okay.
FM radio announcer, but he was also at the Plaza Hotel in '64 when the Beatles arrived, and he met them
Wow.
and
And of
knew them
course,
throughout his life. So
if
he
I'm
could his
if I'm not,
stories were personal.
if I'm not mistaken, that's where they were staying in New York at the time, right?
Correct. That's right.
At the Plaza Hotel.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where they had the press conference. Why do you guys have long hair?
Blah, 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 blah,
Yeah,
blah.
yeah,
The personal
well,
Jesus, the
right.
Jesus thing.
So you started out obviously in your life as a fans and
Yeah.
listening to music and all that type of
And I
thing.
was the music director. After a while, I became the music director at YSP, so I got to hear just about everything that came out. And I used to go to 3 or 4 shows a week. Just,
Nice.
I mean, the people I saw in small places, like, I remember I interviewed Bono from U2.
Oh,
I drove him from the television studio to the club, the Bijou Cafe, where there were 20 people.
Wow.
So um, things like that.
That's amazing.
A bunch of other bands. Boston, I was the first
oh,
person to play Boston. Everybody liked it, but no one wanted to play it. And I remember the CBS rep called me up, and they were doing a launch party with our competing station. But the guy called me up, and he said, they won't put the band on the air yet. Can we come over and play it on your station. And I said, sure. So Tom Scholes came over,
Wow.
and I
Tom
was the first
Scholes.
person to interview them on the air and play More Than a Feeling. And the first time I heard that song, I knew it was going to be a smash. I think everybody did.
And
Wow.
ironically,
That's great.
I, I love Tom Scholl's organ part for which song is that? Oh God, it's a Boston tune, but I can't remember which one it is.
No, they
Long
didn't want to,
time?
they didn't want,
Thank you,
it's been a long, yeah,
thank
okay.
you. Yeah.
All right, you knew you remembered it. Now they didn't want to play it because the songs were too long, maybe, or is it?
No, they were totally unknown. Nobody ever heard of him.
Okay.
He had no history. I mean, he was an engineer at Polaroid. He was one of the people that worked on the Polaroid SX70 instant camera. He was an engineer.
Wow.
I think he went to MIT. I'm not sure,
I think
but
he
he
did.
wasn't
I think he did.
really. He wasn't. He didn't. Wasn't in like several groups, and then got. And he did the whole album by himself. And then he went out and hired the other people, except for the vocalist, Brad Delp, who he already knew and who sang on it. The rest of the band was put together when the album was finished.
Oh, okay. So who
So,
else have you interviewed? Tell us the wealth of.
well, I could probably tell you who I haven't interviewed more than I can.
Mm,
I've interviewed just about everybody, including all the Beatles, except for John. And I was on my way I had an engagement to do with him, but of course, we all know what happened
past.
there.
Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
All the members of Led Zeppelin,
Ooh.
all the Stones, all the members of Pink Floyd. And a lot of these were like, one-on-one, like, David
Uh,
Gilmour.
Yeah, not like a big group of press
Yeah, because
people.
I would do a radio special on them, and I'd usually what I'd do is I'd go out on the road with them for 2 or 3 days so I could get my interviews done, but also get a feel for what was happening. And that I think was key.
Yeah, yeah, that's
And
cool.
It's funny
in
that you
making our
mentioned the Beatles
shows,
because I'm a
yeah,
huge fan of their legendary producer George Martin.
right. Yeah, I've interviewed him a number of times.
Wow.
That dude is crazy. Just yeesh.
Yeah, tell us about George Martin a little bit and the Beatles. Tell
Well,
us
yeah,
you.
George Martin, actually, history's sort of nobody wanted to sign the Beatles. They were
Well, I
turned
know
down by everybody.
Decca. They were turned
Finally,
down,
Brian Epstein
right?
went to a publishing company, and he happened to meet this guy, George Martin.
Mm-hmm.
And while he was there, Brian Epstein said, "Would you like to hear this group I have called the Beatles?" So George Martin said, "Sure." And I think he played him "Please Please Me" or "Love Me Do" or one of those. And George Martin said, "Well, they're interesting. I'll tell you what, why don't you let's set up a time for the band to come and do a live audition at Abbey Road, which is the studio that George Martin worked at. It
Right.
wasn't called Abbey Road then, it was EMI Studios, but it became
Okay.
famous
Can
because of the album and everything else. It's now called EMI's Abbey Road Studios. And after he worked with them, he said, "Yeah, I think there's something here. Let's." He got EMI to sign them, and he was assigned to produce them. And he produced their first record, and on there was a song called "Love Me Do,"
Mhm.
and that became their first hit record. I think it went to number 17 or
And I
something.
believe
Wow.
their engineer at the time was Jeff Emmerich.
Well, yeah, yeah, they had this couple of engineers. Jeff Emmerich at that time. Later on, they had, Alan Parsons was an engineer there. I'm trying to think of the rest of them. The most of those producers went on to have huge careers on their
Yeah.
own,
Alan Parsons
having
especially.
worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
all the Beatles that you did interview, nice guys, good people,
yeah,
that
yeah.
type of.
Everybody was great. Nobody, they were all not really nice. Ringo was the most animated.
Sure.
Which is funny because
Yeah.
a lot of people always mention to us Greg Bissonette half the time, and
Yeah,
he played with Ringo for 19 years.
that's right.
Yeah, right.
That's right. In the
Yeah, but
what did
they had their
Ringo
own
and the Roundheads
individual
and the other separate things.
characteristics, and that's what made them the Beatles. So,
yeah.
and of course, the Beatles broke it open for everybody else.
I mean,
come through.
one of Brian Epstein's other clients, Jerry and the Pacemakers, of course.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
they
was
opened
managing, he
up the
had like
door.
7 or 8 groups he was managing, Freddie and the Dreamers, Jerry and the
Pacemakers,
Pacemakers. I can't even remember them
the
all.
Searchers, I think was one of them.
Now we know you're very proud of because you've had two editions of the Led Zeppelin book.
Yeah, I created around the country, stations were playing a block of Led Zeppelin songs every night, 3 songs in a row, just three, and some were calling it the Zeppelin block, some were calling it "Let's Get the Lead Out,"
Yeah, yep.
and I said to myself, you know what? There should be a weekly, hour-long show on Led Zeppelin, and I started the syndicated version of "Get the Lead Out."
What
This is
year was that, Denny?
this was gosh, in the late 80s.
Okay.
So that would have been
Um,
what?
and
Well,
then,
Zeppelin 4 would have just came out.
No, they would have been done by that time. Late 80s.
Oh yeah, because Bonham would have been dead.
Right. Late
yeah,
80s. Okay.
yeah, I never did interview John Bonham,
Okay.
but I have interviewed his son and all the people. And the book is
Jason,
basically all the different people that had interaction with the group at one point or another. Either they were involved in the studio with him, like Eddie Kramer, Ron Nevison. These were two of the producers that worked with him.
Glynis Johns was
Um,
always there.
Yeah. And anybody that had any major star that I interviewed, because most of them, I'd say the majority of them, if not all, saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and were influenced by them. So I would
Hmm.
start asking questions before I even knew I was going to do a Beatles show. I said, so tell me about the first time you saw the Beatles and blah, blah. And they go on and on and on. And I started building up this library of comments about the Beatles by well-known people, Jeff Beck, Hart, Alice Cooper, Vanilla Fudge, anybody that had ever shared a stage with them. And I started building up that library. And that's when I decided, you know what? There should be a weekly Led Zeppelin show. And that's how that came about. And what
Right.
basically happened was after I did the Beatles show, it was on. Everybody said, oh, that's a great idea. It'll last 13 weeks. Well, it was on for 10 years.
Wow.
And
Congratulations,
people
Denny.
were writing
That's great.
letters and emailing me, hey, you have all these interviews, but we only get to hear bits of them. How can we hear the rest of them? So I decided to compile a book of all these Beatle interviews because I only use like a minute or two for the radio show. And I got a book deal with William Morrow and put out a book called Ticket to Ride. Now, there's a couple different books called Ticket to Ride, but this was based on the radio show that I did with Scott Muni. So that was my first book. And then, same thing happened here. People wanted to know, well, I had all the members of the Yardbirds. The Yardbirds were obviously Led Zeppelin before Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
I had all these great stories, the publicists that worked for them, the promoters that promoted them, the record company executives, all those people that had stories. The guy that used to do their light show, incredible stories. But I was only able to use a minute or two on each show. So I collected those interviews, and I mean, today I still have everything I ever interviewed. I have the largest collection of
Wow.
interviews with classic rock artists.
Good
Probably,
idea to keep
you
everything.
know,
Yeah.
private
Collections.
collection because the BBC obviously and the places like that have bigger interview libraries. But
Who,
um,
Wow.
who,
so I did this book, and I was able to get a lot of. Being a fan myself, I knew what people wanted. At least I thought I did. People wanted to see the memorabilia and everything. So I found this guy in Virginia who is the number one Led Zeppelin collector, not of records,
Wow.
but of memorabilia, like posters and all that stuff.
use drumsticks, blah blah blah. Same
Yeah,
stuff.
and I went to him and I said, look, if I pay you, because his house was full, it was completely full 3 times over. I said, if
Jeez.
I pay you, will you let me shoot photographs of all your memorabilia? And he said, okay. So that's how I got the memorabilia in the book, and a lot of it no one's seen before. Um,
What are
I
some of
also,
the other things he had in there? In his
pardon me?
collect, what were some of the items that he
Well,
had?
they're all in the book.
We'll have to
Yeah,
look
The
them
you'll have
up.
book,
to
yeah.
page through it. I can't really uh,
Well,
tell you too much about, but there's all sorts of, mostly posters and tickets
Okay,
and all
tickets.
that kind of stuff. And
Okay.
tchotchkes, whatever.
who are some of your favorite people that you've ever interviewed?
My favorite interview, it's funny, somebody asked me the other day, it's always hard to say, but my favorite interview, and I've interviewed him about 4 or 5 times, was Pete Townsend.
Oof.
Oh,
Oof.
And because he was like a real guy, and like I said, 4 or 5 times I interviewed him. And when we would get done with the interview, and I was wrapping up the equipment, and he was waiting for his manager to come in, we had some time. We played rock trivia, you know. So he's a really cool guy, and also a great talker, told great stories. And so I would have to say he was probably my favorite interview.
Oof.
okay.
That's
Yeah, I worked for a place called Maryville Academy for many years, and he did some benefit type things for them. He
Right,
seems like that kind of person,
right.
wanting to contribute to things. Um,
So yeah, yeah,
I also read that you produced Johnny Winter and Todd
yeah. Well,
Rundgren.
here's what happened. After my production company was going, and it was the late '80s. I came in contact with everybody, managers, record companies, yada yada yada. And I had a partner, and we just said, we should start something that didn't exist then. Now it does. And that was the idea of taking established stars and making new records of new music, not re-recording their old hits. And, because a lot of them, it was tough to get deals if you'd already done, 10 albums in your career, whatever. So I would come across people. I came across Johnny Winter. I came across Dave Mason, who
Okay,
recently passed away,
rest in
and
peace.
got involved in producing those couple of records. And then a couple of years, right around that time in the late '80s, I had a label distributed by Capitol. It was called Cinema Records. And I heard a tape. I was up at Capitol's office and just walking around because I would do that whenever I'd go to LA, just walk the building. Some guy, some guy who's an A&R guy, he said, you might want to listen to this tape. This guy's pretty good. He's a guitar player from Austin. And he said, I actually signed him when I was at Warner Brothers and did one record, which did nothing. And nobody's signed him. Nobody's done anything about him, but he is absolutely amazing. He was Stevie Ray Vaughan's favorite guitar player.
Yeah,
Whoa.
He
Johnny
was
Winter's great.
Jeff Baxter from the Doobie Brothers' favorite guitar
Skunk.
player.
Well, okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Skunk. And
Okay.
even Prince.
Hmm.
And what happened was there's a show called Austin City Limits.
Yes.
Yep.
It's syndicated. Well, Eric was on one of the first shows, and he was the first artist to do the show without having a record deal. And Prince, or somebody that works for him, saw that show, and they told Prince about it. Prince was on Warner Brothers, and he called, and he just said, "This guy's amazing. Somebody should sign him." So I went to Capitol, and I said, "Listen, I love this guy's his new demos, which we had gotten, and it had a song on there called Cliffs of Dover, which went on to be a song." And the record went platinum and won a Grammy in
Wow.
'82. So
And
What a life you've had.
this
yeah,
was I want to say this was I oh this was Johnny's stuff
yeah.
still.
Johnny was 80, the winner of '88. That was the name of the album.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
yeah, Johnny Winter, who didn't have a label for about 4 or 5 years. He was making records for a small label called Alligator Records out of Chicago,
Yep.
but no major wanted to sign him. And after him coming to my office and explaining to him, listen, I don't want you to just make a quote unquote Johnny Winter record, what you've done. If you were to do a new record, um, what would you do? And that's basically what we did. I mean, there were blues songs and there were some covers, but it was basically Johnny Winter in 1988. He wasn't just doing, old guys blues songs.
Yeah, yeah, that's
He
cool
was
because he
writing
really,
some. I knew where to go for writers who were writing modern blues material, and I found some songs for him, and just thought it was great, and he was
yeah, he
amazing.
really had a resurgence at that
He
point.
had a little bit of a resurgence, but the record only sold like 200,000, which you
Did you
know,
ever get to interview one of my favorite producers, Ted Templeman?
um, no, but I met him a few times, never interviewed him.
Okay. And what did you produce with Todd Rundgren or for Todd Rundgren?
A live video shot at the Country Club in LA of Utopia Live,
Oh, I
which
love
was
Utopia.
1982. We did that. And then they put it out actually, it came out as a VHS. It's never been issued on DVD, so it's very hard to find.
Yeah, before you came out, we were talking about, I was telling these guys that Kasim Sultan, he played bass for Utopia, but then he moved on to Blue
Yeah,
Oyster Cult. He's played with a ton of people.
yeah.
Seems like a real good player. I wore this shirt for you. Can you tell us the Yes connection?
Yeah, I was a big Yes fan, and I got to meet some of the guys in the early '80s, and became very good friends with Chris Squire, the bass player. In fact, years later, I was an usher at his wedding, his second wedding.
I
Um,
saw that.
but
Yeah, I did see.
yeah, I became friends with all of them actually. And then in 1980, when John Anderson and Rick Wakeman left, before anybody knew it, they were working on a new album called Drama. And they were very concerned of how the public was going to react. Because one thing about Yes is they never sold like millions and millions of records, but they sold out every concert. For
Sure.
years, they
Yeah.
held the record of the most sold out shows at the Garden, the Spectrum, etc. Yes, tickets were always a big item. So they were afraid because they were going to do a tour. They'd already started to plan it, and the news broke that John Anderson was no longer going to be in the band, and Rick Wakeman wasn't going to be in the band, and these two guys that nobody ever heard of, which turned out to be the Buggles, joined, and they became the singer and keyboard player.
Wait, the Buggles
But
with the video killed the radio star, that those
yeah,
people?
those two guys.
Wow. Nice.
What happened was they were being managed by the same guy that was managing Yes.
Ah,
So they were at the office one day, and they said, well, we need a vocalist and a keyboard player. And the Buggles weren't, I mean, they're basically a studio band. They weren't a real band.
so they didn't,
Okay.
so they
And they were
hadn't
big Yes
done
fans. So they joined the band. But then word got out and nobody knew anything about the Buggles really, except that their
until,
video was the first one to be played on MTV.
yep.
Um,
Can you name those two players?
yeah, but
Trevor
Trevor
Rabin?
Horn and Jeff
Yeah.
Downs.
Okay.
And what happened was the manager I was in, so I was working on a Yes special to coincide with the release of that album. And I went to England for 2 weeks and spent time with them in the studio doing the Drama album. And the manager came in one day and he said, I got to tell you, there's bad news. People are starting to return their tickets.
Ooh,
This is unheard of. Turning,
yeah.
because they're not sure. And I said, well, let me tell you something. Let's move the special up a bit and let's premiere the Drama album in the special and try and get as much interest as we can.
Good idea.
And we did, and they, turned out everything worked out. They
Yeah.
sold out Madison Square Garden, three dates on that tour, and of course later John left again, and then they came back, and one of the guys they were going to be a group called Cinema without John. It was Chris and Tony Kaye and um, or yeah, Alan White and I can't remember who the other one was. Anyway, um, they became Cinema, and Trevor Rabin, that was it. He was the guitar
Right,
player.
right.
He
Him
brought a
I know.
song in to play to submit to the group, and it was called Owner of a Lonely Heart. It was a
which
real
was
rough version of it.
which became
And he
Yes's
said,
biggest
well,
hit.
they were listening to tapes,
Hmm.
and it went by, and I think it was Chris that said, wait a minute, what was that? Because that's just something I was working on. I think it's too complicated for Yes. No, 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 let me hear that. So he played him the demo, and Chris said, you know what? That's a
We'll do it.
hit.
Yeah,
And
and they were
Yes
right.
Cinema decided to do it. And then right before that album was coming out, Chris decided he would go see John Anderson just to let him hear what they were working on. And John heard the record and he said, well, you know what? I'd like to sing on that record. And so, yes, with John Anderson was back and they put out Owner of a Lonely Heart and it's, sold 3 million copies and was their first and only number
Number
one
one.
song.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
What a life you've had. I hope we can have you back on again if you would do
Happy to
that.
do it. Happy to do
And
it.
before we wrap up, my buddy Tom, who
Yeah.
reached out to you about coming on the show, he wanted me to ask you about the continuous history of rock and roll. Was
Right.
that your idea? And why did you think it was good for syndicated radio? And how
Okay.
did Rolling Stone play a part?
All right, I
Yeah.
sort of answered that. Rolling Stone announced they were going to start a radio network and they
Okay.
needed a show to launch it. And they were taking pitches from people. And I called up and I said, I was sort of established. I was doing NBC. And I said, I'd like to do a pitch for Jan. And Jan Wenner, the publisher.
Right, right.
And they said, okay, come on up. I went up to the office. And I got to tell you something. I wasn't even sure I had a title or anything. I just always had that book with me because I love reading it. And on the train on the way to New York, I said, you know what? The radio show should be based on this book because this book's got a chapter on every type of, musician, great drummers, the British
Okay.
invasion. So on the train on the way up, I sketched out, let's call it the continuous history of rock and roll because the history is still being made. And I just, went into the Jan's office. There was a programming guy there and somebody else. They said, well, let's hear your idea. And I said, well, I don't, you're Rolling Stone. You got a name. I don't think you have to reinvent anything. So I just threw the book down on the table and I said, let's turn this book into a radio show. Well, they went crazy. And
That's awesome.
again, yeah, so that was on for 3 years. And then eventually ABC bought the network from Jan and it was on for another year on ABC. And so that's how that came about. I just thought it was all encompassing and all sorts of people. It got to the point where, and Rolling Stone would run, ads in the magazine because we were associated with them. Started getting calls. Like I did a show on British invasion,
Hmm.
and it was listed in this big ad. And when it came out, I get a call from David Bowie's office.
Whoa.
Gee.
And they go,
Wow.
well, David wants to know why he isn't in that show.
No kidding.
He
Well,
should
I
be.
wouldn't. Well,
Wow.
I
I
know he
said,
should, but I
well,
didn't think he would be part of it technically.
I don't have an interview with him. If he'll grant me an interview, we'll put him in a show.
Did you
Nice.
did you ever get to interview like Tommy Shaw and Dennis DeYoung at all?
Yeah, I know the Styx guys very well. JY is a very close friend of mine. I know all of them.
Then he
Tommy,
knows
I know.
everybody. Come here.
Dennis.
Lord, apparently,
I did a
That's
because
Styx
awesome.
special. That's basically it. And plus, I've seen them probably 15 times. I just happen to really like them.
That's nice.
that's funny you say that because my first legit concert was John White, Foreigner, and Styx. So
Ah, there you go. That was
Steve's a
something.
big music fan. Well, we want to
thank
thank you,
you.
Denny, for coming on. Really, we really appreciate it. You're just
It's a pleasure. Now,
unbelievable.
where does this show run on a platform or
Yeah,
how do you?
we'll have it up by Monday. It'll be on Spotify and on YouTube.
Okay.
And
Are
then
you
they,
familiar? Let me just tell you this because of what you're doing, your organization.
yeah.
I do a weekly radio show for a nonprofit organization for anybody that's on the spectrum, a little bit. And have regular shows too, but this guy created this thing called New New HD,
Okay.
and it's an app. It's also on. You can get it through various, Spotify, wherever. But it's called Rock and Roll for Grownups, and I still produce that weekly hour show. And I basically took, if you notice, in the classic rock era, moved forward, you hear very little music from the late 60s, 70s, and early 80s. It's all been moved up to the 90s and the aughts. And, I'll give you an example. Like Eric Clapton recorded 700 songs. The only two you ever hear on the radio are I Shot the Sheriff and Layla.
Yeah, right.
Dire Straits did 300 songs. And the only song you ever hear
Money
is
for
Sultans
Nothing.
of Swing.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So I realized that these are great songs, but there's no place for them.
There's a lot
So
more than what they think there is.
Sure.
yeah,
Um,
so and these were all great musicians. I mean, I told my son, I took him to see Emerson, Lake and Palmer when he was 12,
Oh,
and I said, now watch this keyboard player because he's the most amazing keyboard player you're ever going to see.
yeah, he is. He was.
Sure
And
enough, that was, Keith Emerson, obviously. But
mhm.
I just realized that these guys were, they were real musicians. They weren't what nowadays people call disposable music. Groups like Haircut 100, they're here one day and gone the next. These guys all have a foundation.
yeah.
So that's what. Anyway, I was going to tell you to check out newhd.com
Okay.
and check out what they're doing. They may have some overlapping things that you're doing.
Okay, we will. And then
And
maybe you and I could talk about it separately. I'd like
yeah,
to,
that's fine. Not a
because I'd
problem.
like to get some direction from you of where we might
Want to go with
take
this?
we've done now 21 episodes, so we'd like to keep it going.
Okay, no
So if you
problem.
don't
It was a
mind, I'll
pleasure.
thank
Thanks
you.
for asking me.
Oh,
Yeah,
and
thank
And
you, Denny.
I
if
just want to let everybody know you can get the book at Barnes and Noble, or you can go to Amazon if you want it delivered. I think it's on sale this week at Amazon. So
Okay.
if
uh, it's a great book. It took me quite a while to compile it, but it is the definitive book. I had Carmine Appice wrote the forward. He, of course, was the
Okay.
drummer.
that's funny because we tried to get Carmine
We're
for
trying to work on getting
yeah.
him as a guest.
And
He was John Bonham's idol and mentor.
We want to thank Denny for coming on today. Thank you very much, Denny, and we hope to have you on again. And everybody, please go out and get Denny's book, Get the Let Out, at Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Thank you very much, Denny. Take care. Bye bye.